वर्णाक्षरसमाम्नयम् अधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयं नत्वा सरस्वतीं देवीं शुद्धां गुण्यां करोम्यहं पाणिनीयप्रवेशाय लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुदीम्। लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुद्याः सुधाटीकायां विप्रतिषेधे परं कार्यम् इत्यस्य सूत्रस्य अध्ययनं क्रियते। तत्र बहवः विषयाः अस्माभिः पूर्वेषु वर्गेषु अधीताः। झटिति किञ्चित् पुनरावर्तनं पुनस्मारणं कारयामि. So the first point we studied was the Vipratishedhe Param Karyam Sutram and the Bhashya of this particular Sutram, various concepts elaborated in the Bhashya. We talked about cases where Vipratishedhe Param Karyam can be treated as a Dwara versus it can be treated as a Niyama and so on. What you should always remember are typical stock examples. So vipratishethe param karyam ityasya udaharanani kani iti prashnah kriyate chet. Without thinking, you should be able to provide a bunch of say 3 or 4 examples as a stock examples for vipratishethe param karyam. So if you do not probably remember or recollect them, it's a good time to think about them, write them, keep them safe at one place, and always refer to these whenever a question like that is asked. So a typical stock example of Vipratishedhe Param Karyam is obviously Vrukshebhyaha. We have a conflict between Supicha and Bahuvachane Jhalyeto. So this has been captured in the Bhashya with the statement Ato Dirgha Bahuvachane Etvam Bhavati Vipratishedhena. Ato Dirgha ityukte Supicha ityasya apekshaya Bahuvachane Etvam ityukte Bahuvachane Jhalyeta ityanena ekaradesha bhavati Vipratishedhena. This is always the first example that is taught. The second example that we saw was Itva Uttvabhyam Gunavruddhi Bhavatah Vipratishedhena. Ruta it dhatoho causes ikaradesha and sarvadhatukardhatukayoho causes guna. There is a anyatra prapti of each of them. And in case of like tarati, where you have to apply the tru dhatu plus shap pratyaya, ruta id dhatoho and sarvadhatukardhatukayoho conflict, and sarvadhatukardhatukayoho wins because of paratva. So itva utvabhyam gunavruddhi bhavataha vipratishedhena. That is the second example of vipratishedha. The third example typically given of Vipratishedha is the iyang uvang adesha versus guna and vruddhi. Guna vruddhi iyam uvangdhyam bhavataha Vipratishedhena. Because of Vipratishedha, the iyang and uvang are blocked by guna vruddhi. Iyang and uvang are given by achishnu dhatu bhruvang voho iyang uvangau. Guna vruddhi again by sarvadhatu kardhatu kayoho. There are individual places where each of these sutras can apply. But in case like say bhavati, bhu plus shapa, because it is bhu plus a, achishnu dhatu bhuvam can also apply, sarvadhatu kardhatu kayoho can also apply, and sarvadhatu kardhatu kayoho wins because of paratva. So guna vruddhi bhavataha yang uvangdhyam vipratishedhena. So that is the third example. These three typical examples, and then any examples of anga karya versus varna karya you can typically classify under Vipratishedhe Param Karyam. The same example of Bhavati, but a conflict between Iko Yanachi and Sarvadhatuka Ardhadhatukayoho. So Bhu plus A plus Ti ityatra Iko Yanachi ityasya api prasaktihi asti, Sarvadhatuka Ardhadhatukayoho ityasya api prasaktihi asti. You can pick Sarvadhatuka Ardhadhatukayoho because of Paratva. So typically any Anga Karya versus Varna Karya conflict, most of them can always be picked up based on Paratva. In some of the previous classes, I think either in the class or offline, we discussed the paribhasha of Varnad Angam Baliyaha. I explained it in thorough details that Varnad Angam Baliyaha is a paribhasha that is typically used for Antaranga Bahiranga. When there are three entities, then there is a scope of Varnad Angam Baliyaha. You should not be using Varnad Angam Baliyaha for cases where you have to resolve Anga Karya and Varna Karya. We have already seen it in the Paribhasha Indushekara. So this is basically the general set of examples of Vipratishedhe Param Karyam that you should always remember. Now then we moved ahead and we said that for Vipratishedhe Param Karyam, the sutra can be interpreted in two ways. Dwaram kriyate, niyamaha kriyate. Niyama kriyate means both the sutras want to act and we stop one of them and let only go other ahead So that's the Niyama Paksha. In this Niyama Paksha, we block the second sutram using the paribhasha Sakrudgato Vipratishedhe Yad Badhitam Tad Badhitam Eva. So when there is a Vipratishedha and when one of the sutra gets blocked, it is always blocked. Sakrudgato Vipratishedhe Yad Badhitam Tad Badhitam Eva. The other paksha was that no sutra wants to act, and then we forcefully push one sutra, a door gets opened, and the other sutra might go through that particular door. So then we apply the paribhasha punah prasanga vijnanat siddham. When one entity is executed, if there is a scope for other entity, the other entity can also get executed. So punah prasanga vijnanat siddham. You should also remember stock examples of Punah Prasanga Vijnana Siddham and Sakrut Gatau. So we studied Sakrut Gatau examples 2 classes ago. Most of you know these examples. We have, for example, Tisru plus Am, the Shashti Bahuvachana Prakriya of the 3 in the Strilinga. So Tisru plus Am. There is a conflict between Tres Trayaha, where 3 becomes Traya, and Trichaturoho Striyam Tisru Chatusru. So here what we do is when there is a conflict between Treyaha and Trichaturoho Striyam Tisru Chatusru, we select Trichaturoho Striyam Tisru Chatusru. Now Treyaha can appear back because of Sthanivad Bhava. That gets blocked because of Sakrudgato Vipratishedhe Yad Badham Tad Badhitam Eva. The second example that we saw was again Malayam. Mala Shabda is Saptami Ekvachanam. You have a conflict between Yadapaha and Hraswaradhyaponuta. First you have Mala plus Ni. Ni becomes Am by Niram Madhyam Nibhyaha. When you have Mala plus Am, you can get the Yadagamaha by Yadapaha, or you can get the Nudagama by Hraswaradhyaponuta. The Yadagama is Parra. We do the Yadagama and then we block the Nudagama by Sakrudgato Vipratishide Yad Badhitam Tad Badhitam Eva. The third example we saw was Matyam, where there is a same situation but the conflict between Ananadhyaha and Hrasvanadhyaponuta. So Mati plus Am ityatra Ananadhyaha ityanena Adagamaha kriyate, Adagame krute agre Hrasvanadhyaponuta ityanena Nudagamaha prapnoti. So Hrasvanadhyaponuta was applicable in the first step as well as in the second step. In the first step, it got blocked by Vipratishedha. We did not pick it in the next step. We also saw in the same context the example of Yushmat Sarvanama Napumsakalinga Prathama Ekvachanam. So in Yushvat Sarvanama Napumsakalinga Prathama Ekvachanam, Swamor Napumsakat might cause the look of the Pratyaya, or Ne Prathamayoram might cause the Amadesha. The Amadesha wins by Paratva. Now again Swamor Napumsakata can come over there because is Su by Sthanivad Bhava. That gets blocked by Sakrudgato Vipratishedhe Yad Badhitam Tad Badhitam Eva. So these are stock examples of Sakrudgato that you should always remember. Then we move to Punah Prasanga Vijnana Siddham. As I mentioned, in Punah Prasanga Vijnana Siddham, most of the examples are from the Tinganta Prakriya. You have not studied these examples. Therefore, we just took 2 examples. We quickly looked at them. The first example was Ijatuhu. Yajadhatoho lit lakarasya prathama purushasya dvivachanam. Atus pratyah tatra vidyate. Ij plus atus ityatra samprasaranam and dvitvam. There is a conflict between the two. Samprasaranam is para, dvitva is purva, but we want to do both of them. So you do samprasaranam and then you do dvitva, ija plus ija, and then final form gets created. The second example we saw was lut lakara prathama purusha ekvachanam adhyeta. So you have adhi plus ina plus luta. Tas pratyaya, because it is antaranga, will come in the lavastha. So you have ina plus tas plus luta. At this point, luta gets converted to ta, and then there is a conflict between tita atmane padanam tere and lutaf prathamasya daro rasaha. So tita atmane padanam tere is a parasutra. It wins over lutaf prathamasya daro rasaha, and then lutaf prathamasya daro rasaha comes back again because of sakrut gato vipratishedhe badhitam tad badhitam eva. I also mentioned that across these 2 particular examples, there was a very interesting difference. In the first example, both the karyas were required. So we did the spara karya and then we did the purva karya. In the second case of Adhyeta, only one karya was required, but it was a purva karya. So Vartikakara actually proposed that let's do a purva vipratishedha over here. But Bhashyakara says it is not required. You can do the para karya, which is an undesired karya, and on the top of that, you can still do the purva karya, and then you get the final form correctly. So with this, let's now go to the concept of Purva Vipratishedha. So Purva Vipratishedha is a situation where a Purva Sutra wins over the Parasutra when there is a Vipratishedha. Always understand this. We are discussing Vipratishedha. So Dvau Prasangau Anyarthau Ekasmin Prapnutaha. So when there is a Vipratishedha and when the Parasutra does not necessarily give a correct form, you can resort to the Purva Vipratishedha, and Purva Vipratisheda might be able to help you. So he, in the sense Vartikakara, lists a few cases of Purva Vipratisheda, and he basically tries to give a general blanket statement saying Vipratishedhe param angadhikare purvam. He says in the Angadhikara, let's try to apply Purva Vipratishedha, and outside the Angadhikara, let's stick to Para Vipratishedha. Now obviously this does not work, but he says, if you do that, then Purva Vipratishedhaha na patitavyaha bhavanti. The typical examples of Purva Vipratishedha that are given in the Shastra are of Angakarya. So in the Angakarya, a Purva Sutra wins over the Parasutra. So he actually enumerates two such examples or two such statements containing multiple examples. Gunavruddhi autva trujvad bhavebhyo num Purva Vipratishedham Numachir Trujvad Bhavebhyo Nut Vipratishiddham. But then the Bhashyakara says that in the case of Angakarya also, sometimes Parasutra will win. So having a blanket rule that Purva Sutra will only win in case of Angakarya is not a correct solution. Instead, we can simply say Ishtavachi Parashabdaha. So Parashabda has multiple meanings. Four meanings have been given by Bhashyakara. So he says Parashabdaha ayam bhavvarthaha asti eva vyavasthayam vartate. So purva para, before and after, is the vyavastha. This is what you typically use when you say Vipratishedhe param karyam. Then he says para also has a meaning of anya. So parasya putraha, parasya bharya, or paraha cha asau putraha, paracha iyam bharya. So it is anya. It is also used in the pradhanya, primary importance. So parama sakha, parama brahmani, and so on. Asti ishtavachi parashabdaha, param dhama, and so on. So param brahma. So ishta ityasmin arthe yaha parashabdaha tasya atra grahanam kartavyam vipratishedhe param ityukte vipratishedhe yad ishtam tad kartavyam iti ashayah. अनेन प्रकारेण विप्रतिषेधे परं कार्यम् इत्यस्य कश्चन भिन्नः अर्थः तत्र भाष्यकारेण प्रतिपादितः वर्तते. Now, if you always take Vipratished Param Ityukte Ishtam, then there is really no need of writing any sutras or Vyakarana Shastra. In any Prakriya, whatever is the Ishta on the next step, you pick it up. So that's not how this is to be interpreted. If the default choice of Parasutra does not work, in the sense you use the default Parasutra and the Prakriya does not successfully complete, in those rare cases, you can resort back to Purva Vipratishedha by reinterpreting the Sutra is what this particular statement means. So the two Purva Vipratisheda examples that have been enumerated in this particular Vyakhyana, Gudavruddhi Autva Trujvad Bhavebhyo Num Vipratishidham and Numachir Trujvad Bhavebhyo Nut Vipratishidham. So Guna Vruddhi Autva Trujvad Bhavebhyo Num Vipratishidham. Four things have been told. For all those four things, the Numagama is actually a Purva Sutra. All these are Parasutras or Parakaryas. However, when there is a conflict, the Parakarya will get blocked by the Purvakarya, that is the Numagama, on the account of Purva Vipratishedha. So that is the first Vartika, Guna, Vruddhi, Autva, and Trujvad Bhava. What is the example of Guna versus Num? Anybody?
Nirniti.
Guna.
Guna.
Gherniti. Gherniti.
Gherniti versus Ikochi Vibhaktau. Ikochi Vibhaktau is common across all of them because most of these will be used in the Prakriya of Vari or some kind of Ikaranta, Ukaranta, Napumsakalinga word. So Gherniti versus Ikochi Vibhaktau. Gherniti will give a Guna. What is the Anyatra Prapti or of Gherniti?
Hari
Um,
Shabda. Pullinge.
ha-
Haraye. Haraye iti vaktum shakyate. What is the Anyatra Prapti for Ikochi Vibhaktau?
Vari, varini, varini, tatra.
Not vari, varini. Now there is a vipratishedha in chaturthi ekvachana. Gher giti is a parasutra, ikochi vibhakta is a purva sutra, but ikochi vibhakta will win over gher giti because of purva vipratishedha. So that is the example of guna versus num. Second, vruddhi versus num. Have you studied the example?
There is ati sakhi iti
Very
samasam
good,
krutva
very good. Ati sakhi iti ikaranta napumsakalinga shabdaha. Tasya prathama bahuvachanam. Ati sakhi plus jasa. What you have studied?
सख्युर सम्बुद्धौ इत्यनेन निद्वद्भावः भवति स्म परन्तु अत्र
Correct.
तद् निषिध्यते
णित्वद्भावः भवति, that is not निषिध्यते. See,
Achoniti.
Sakyura
That is
Sambuddha with
sorry
So Sakyura Sambuddha vityanena nidvadbhavah krute achoniti ityanena vruddhih prapnoti sa nishidhyate ikochi vibhaktau iti tatra numagami krute ati sakhini iti rupam siddhyati. Very good. Third, autva versus numagama.
अच्छघेः
Very good. Vari shabdasya saptami ekvachanam achaghehe is blocked by ikochi vibhaktau. You all know this. Fourth, trujvad bhava versus num.
there again samasah priya kroštru iti
हाँ,
priya
प्रिय
kroštu iti
क्रोष्टु, हाँ, अति क्रोष्टु, प्रिय क्रोष्टु. Bhashya gives the example of Krushak Kroshtu, I think, or somewhere one of the commentaries. So Krushak Kroshtu, Ati Kroshtu, Priya Kroshtu. Again, in all these cases, Chaturthi Ekvachanam, Vibhasha Tritiyadishu Achi will force a Trujvad Bhava. It gets blocked by Ikochi Vibhakta, which is a Purva Sutra. Clear so far? So that is the first Vartika. The second Vartika, num achir trujvad bhavebhyo nut vipratishedhena. So three karyas, num representing ikochi vibhaktau, achir representing achirarutaha, and trujvad again representing trujvad bhava. In all these, hrasvanadyapo nutta happens because of purva vipratishedha. Vrisvanadyapo nutta is a previous sutra, it comes in 6.4. It is selected based on purva vipratishedha. So numa versus nutta. Because it is nutta, all the examples will be shashti bahuvachana. Num versus nutta, you can take the example of vari word. Vari plus shashti bahuvachanam. So there is a possibility of rasvanadyapo nutta and there is a possibility of ikochi vibhakta. One of them gives a numagama, other gives a nudagama. Why do we choose rasvanadyapo nutta? Why not ikochi vibhakta if no comes in both the cases?
The dirgha also will
Very
get
good,
affected.
very good. See what happens if you do ikochi vibhaktau and if the numagama is added to the anga, then it will be varin plus am. Whereas in case of nudagama, it will be vari plus nam. Now, what is the difference between varin plus am versus vari plus nam? Vari plus nam forces a dirghadesha by nami, which will give you varinam. If it was varin plus am, a dirghadesha was not possible. You would have got varinam with a rasva ikara. Therefore, you have to select nudagama and you should select it by purva vipratishedha. Second example, achirarutaha versus nudagama. Which is the word that you can use for achirarutaha? Have you studied achirarutaha sutram?
Tisraha, like
Very good. Tisru plus am. So achirarutaha is used for tisru plus jasa. Nut, there are obviously rasvanadyapo nuta, many examples. Tisru plus am ityatra achirarutaha ityasya पूर्व विप्रतिषेधेन ह्रस्वनद्यापो नुट इत्यनेन बाधा क्रियते. So there is a rakaradesha or rephadesha that is blocked by nudagama. Okay, once the nudagama happens, it is no more ajadi pratyaya, so achirarutaha is not applicable. Third example, trujvat plus nutta. Again, as soon as there is trujvat, kroshtu word comes in the mind. Kroshtu plus am, you have trujvat bhava possible, vibhasha tritiyadishu achi, and you have rasvanadyapo nutta. The form is not kroshrunam, it is kroshtunam. Rasvanadyapo nutta blocks the trujvat bhava by purva vipratishetha. So far, so good. Let's now move on to the question of Vari word. We are going to go over all the 21 forms and enumerate all the Vipratishedha and understand how the sutras behave in each of them. Let's start with the Prathama Ekvachana form. Vari plus su. What are the Vipratishedas here?
स्वमोर् नपुंसकात् इति प्रत्ययस्य लुक् भवति ससजुषोरुः अपि भवितुमर्हति.
So sasajushorhu iti bhavitum arhati va iti prashna. Sasajushorhu is in the tripadi. You can say bhavitum arhati, but sasajushoruhu technically does not come in conflict with the sutra of Sapada Saptadhyay. So as long as you are in the Sapada Saptadhyay and you have found a sutram called Swamor Napumsaka, there is no need to go to Tripadi and say that Sasajushoruhu is applicable. So when you are in Sapada Saptadhyay, stay in Sapada Saptadhyay. So Swamor Napumsakat is one sutra. What else?
हल् दीर्घ सुतिस्य कृतं हल्.
Is it Hal? Is it Nyanta or
No.
Abanta?
No.
So this is how Subanta Prakriya should technically be studied. I mean, Laghu Siddhanta Bodhik teaches in a completely different way. Subanta Prakriya should be studied not word by word, but Vibhakti by Vibhakti. When a Vibhakti is given to you, all possible sutras of that Vibhakti should thoroughly flash in the mind, and then a correct sutra should get selected. Maybe at some point in time we will discuss in more details. The Prabhakti Pratyas are divided into three groups. There is a Haladi Pratyas, there is an Ajadi Pratyas, there is Sarvanama Sthana Samneka Pratyas, and then there are different set of karyas that happen for each of them. Anyway, for Vari, only Swamor Napumsakat is applicable. Hal Nyambhyo Dirghat is not applicable. No other sutra is possible. So, Vari plus Su Swamor Napumsakat ityanena Su Pratyasya Luk Kriyate, only Vari iti Rupam Siddhyati. Prathama Dvivachanam Varini. Vari plus Au Varini. Prakriya is there in front of you. Let's think of Badhya Badhaka Bhava on each step, not directly. So let's go to first step. Vari plus Au. Tatra Kidrishaha Badhya Badhaka Bhavaha Asti.
Ego energy.
Okay.
प्रथमयोः पूर्वसवर्णः.
Okay.
नपुंसकाच्च इति शी आदेशः.
Napumsakacha. What else?
इकोचि विभक्तौ इति नुमागमः.
Very good. Ikochi vibhaktau igantasya angasya ajadau vibhaktau numagamaha bhavati. Ikochi vibhaktau iti numagamaha. Okay, so 4 sutras. Anything else?
Yasyeti.
Yasyeti cha is for tadhita pratyaya and e pratyaya. There is no e pratyaya present over here. It is just vari plus au.
My question is, why will there be a clash between Ikochi Vibhaktau and Napumsakacha? Because Napumsakacha happens to the Pratyaya and Ikochi Vibhaktau goes to the Anga. So how can there be a clash there? Is my question.
Okay, so why should there not be a clash between something that happens to a pratyaya and something that happens to an anga? You can always have clash between two sutras that are simultaneously applicable at one place. There is no rule in Ashtadhyayi which says that a pratyaya karya will win over the anga karya. Is there a rule that you have studied, or is there a rule that is written somewhere?
I think we are taught that Pratyaya should be done first always or something.
I understand. So please understand this. When you are studying Laghu Siddhanta Kaumudi, there is no need to go in detailed Shastra. So Siddhantas will be given to you free of cost. But when you are studying Shastra and when you are actually studying Bhadya Bhataka Bhava, you have to question, is this a real Siddhanta? If it is a Siddhanta, let's find out where that Siddhanta is. Right?
So the thing is, we should not. We should be as if we don't know which should be done first, and we are going to analyze which has to be done first.
That is the right technique. So we don't know which is going to be done first. So we have 4 choices over here. In Vari plus Au, you have a choice between Iko Yanachi, you have a choice between Prathamayoho Purva Savarnaha, you have a choice between Napam Sakacha and Ikochi Vibhaktau. So which one gets selected? So Yanadesha and Prathamayoho Purva Savarnaha, you have a choice between Napam Sakacha and Ikochi Vibhaktau. So which one gets selected? Let's do elimination. Which one will not get selected? So Yanadesha and Prathamayoho Purva Savarnaha. First of all, there will be conflict between Prathamayoho Purva Savarnaha and Yanadesha. Prathamayoho Purva Savarnaha wins over Yanadesha. So Yanadesha is out of question. That is the relationship of Utsarga Apavada. We have this article over here. Prathamayoho Purva Savarnaha is an Apavada of Iko Yanachi. I am going to go over this particular document at some point in time, maybe next or next to next class, but this is one of the very important documents. But for now, Iko Yanachi is the Utsarga. So Prathamayoho Purva Savarna wins over Iko Yanachi. Iko Yanachi is gone. So one sutra is down. Now we compare Prathamayoho Purvasavarnaha with Napumsakacha, or even the other one, Ikochi Vibhakta, are Anga Karyas. Anga Karyas will win over the Varna Karyas because of Vipratishetha. Therefore, Prathamayoho Purvasavarna, which is the Varna Karya, is out of question. So, two Varna Karyas, Iko Yanachi and Prathamayoho Purvasavarna. Write these things down if you are not able to recollect in the speed that I am recollecting. So, Iko Yanachi and Prathamayoho Purvasavarna, these are the two Varna Karyas, both of them are out of the picture. Now you are left with two Anga Karyas, Ikochi Vibhaktau and Napumsakacha. Napumsakacha creates a Shi Adesha, which is called a Shi Bhava. Ikochi Vibhaktau causes a Numagama. Now understand. When there is a comparison between Napumsakacha and Ikochi Vibhakta, we have to think about Nitya Anityatva. So think about this.
तत्र नपुंसकात् अङ्गात् औङः शी भवति केवलं नपुंसक अङ्ग एव अपेक्ष्यते
Okay. Napumsaka anga apekshate. Au pratyayasya shi iti bhavati. Aungaha apaha napumsakacha. Au pratyaya gets converted to shi. If you do napumsakacha first, can you do Ikochi Vibhakta later on?
we are doing right.
So if you do Napumsakacha, you can do Ikochi Vibhakta later on. Let's do the reverse. If you do Ikochi Vibhakta first,
We cannot
then
do
can
that.
you do Napumsakacha later on?
We can, right? What is stopping it from not having Mahodaya?
Nobody is stopping you
Because
from
we
not
get
having it.
because
Correct.
just a numagama is coming, still napumsaka anga is there
Napumsaka anga is
and
still there.
aunga, yeah, is there.
Correct. So you
Nitya
can create any one and then you can execute another one. So why are you doing Napumsakacha first and Ikochi Vibhakta? What will happen if you do Ikochi Vibhakta first and then Napumsakacha? If you do Ikochi Vibhakta first, you'll get Varin plus Au, then probably you get Varin plus Shi, and then you will get Varini. So why are you doing Napumsakacha first? Refer back to your notes of Lagu Siddhanta Kaumudi and see if you were taught Napumsakacha first or you were taught Ikochi Vibhakta first.
Napumsakacha first and then only Kochi Bhakta.
Why?
We have been
Why?
taught.
This is the exact reason why Vari Prakriya was given to you. Prathama and Dvitiya are super complex. Beyond that, it flows very smoothly.
either way you are getting Varini, so
Correct. So it doesn't matter whatever you do.
doesn't matter.
That is accepted, and I'm not joking. That is really an acceptable solution in grammar, as long as the order of the sutras, different order of the sutras gives the same final form. It is okay to change the order.
And there cannot be any antaranga, bahiranga also here, right,
Antaranga
Mahodaya?
Bahiranga
Because
requires three components. Always remember this point. If you have two components, it cannot be Antaranga Bahiranga. I just briefly explained it in the last class, but I will go in the details in the next class. But for now, remember that there need to be A, B, C, three components. Here there are only two components, Vari and E or Vari and Au. So Antaranga Bahiranga is not possible. Anyway, now understand this clearly. Now pay close attention. What happens is, if you do Ikoche Vibhaktau first, you will get the Numagama and then Napumsakacha can definitely apply. However, if you do Napumsakacha, Ikochi Vibhakto can apply. But who is the nimitta on which the Ikochi Vibhakto is being applied? In the first case, Ikochi Vibhakto was being applied because of Au. After you do Napumsakacha, Ikochi Vibhakto is being applied because of E. You get the difference? When the nimitta changes, you cannot just say it is the same sutra which is applicable again. It might look like a same sutra, but it is a different instance of that sutra because the nimitta is changing. In the first case, the vidhi, the numagama of Ikochi Vibhakta happens on Vari because of Au. In the second case, the numagama on Vari happens because of E. The nimitta is changing. When the nimitta changes, the particular sutra is called Anitya. If there is a different word that causes the same prakriya to happen, we don't treat it as the same sutra. Clear? What is happening in case of Napumsakacha? If you do Ikochi Vibhakta first, you get the Numagama. Varin can be treated like vari because of ekadesha vikrutam ananyavat. It is the same napumsaka word. Therefore, you can say that varin and vari are one and the same words, and therefore the same napumsakacha is applicable. Whereas in case of au and e, when au gets converted to e, you cannot use sthanivat bhava over here, achi. So it is alvidhi, and therefore the ikochi vibhakto that appears before and the ikochi vibhakto that appears after are different. Whereas napumsakacha which appears before and napumsakacha which appears later are same, and therefore napumsakacha is a nitya sutra, ikochi vibhakto is anitya sutra, and therefore ikochi vibhakto will get blocked by napumsakacha. Shi bhava happens because of nityatva.
Why do we call it as Nitya? Because the nimitta changes from out to ye.
No, we call napumsakacha as nitya. We call ikochi vibhakto as anitya. Ikochi vibhakto is anitya because the nimitta changes from au to e. He says shabdantarat prapnuvatah, shabdantare prapnuvatah cha anityatvam is what the paribhasha given by Nagesha in Paribhashindu Shekhara. So shabdantarat, if the purva nimitta changes, shabdantar is anyaha shabdaha shabdantaram. Shabdantare, when the paranimitta changes. If the same vidhi is applicable because the purva nimitta changes or the paranimitta changes, it is equivalent to saying a different sutra is being applied. And isn't this really obvious? I mean, you considered the possibility of application of ikochi vibhaktu earlier and later, but tell me, is it the same ikochi vibhaktu? No. In the first case, it is because of au pratyaya. In the second case, it is because of e or she pratyaya. It's different. There's no reason to say it's the same.
Still, it's achi only, right, Mahodaya? Like, why should we consider that as anitya? If it changes to something else, is fine, but within achi, that's how we need to look at it, right?
Point is, every sutra will be like that only because there is all the conditions are only captured in a single sutra, right? Then what is the point of having shabdantarat prapnuvatah and shabdantare prapnuvatah? He doesn't say that sutrantare prapnuvatah. Shabda is different. It may be captured by the same sutra. That's not an issue, right?
Yeah, but when we have it as a napumsaka tangat, that vari becomes varin doesn't disturb us because you are
Because
saying it's not
varin
an
is vari. It is
allashrayavadi.
not a shabdantara. It is not a shabdantara at all. Varin is vari by ekadesha vikrutam ananyavat.
Okay.
You have to understand, these are all tricks of the trade to justify the current prakriya. Even if you do reverse, you are still going to get the correct form.
So, although the net effect will be the same, because there is a change in the nimitta, it is called anitya.
Correct.
So, Mahoday, is this an extension of the previous Nitya Anitya where we said one will block the other?
So that's exactly what we discussed in one of the previous classes, that Nitya Anitya is not one sutra. Nitya Anitya is a group of some 8 to 10 sutras. I've been telling this again and again. So all that we studied earlier was one Kruta Kruta Prasangi Nityam. But in Paribhashindu Shekhara, the concept of Nityatva spans over multiple sutras. Paran Nityam Balavat Shabdantara se Prapno Nidhira Nityo Bhavati Shabdantara Shabdantare Lakshanantarena Kochit Kruta Kruta Prasangi Api Nityam यस्य च लक्षणान्तरेण निमित्तं विहन्यते यस्य च लक्षणान्तरेण निमित्तं विहन्यते स्वरभिन्नस्य प्राप्नोन् विधिः. All these are extensions of nitya anitya paribhasha. All these give different cases where something which might be thought as nitya is anitya. So the definition that we learned in the last class is the blanket definition, or is the top level definition, where we say, well, anything that gets blocked is anitya, anything that does not get blocked is nitya. But then in these particular special cases where from one angle it is blocked, from other angle it is not blocked, so these cases are then enumerated by all the subsequent paribhashas.
And do we use the sakrit gatao or punah prasanga vijnanat here also?
So for napumsakacha and ikochi vibhaktu, because there is no direct vipratishedhe param karyam used, you use nitya anitya,
Okay.
so you typically block anitya and then bring up nitya. And that's what we are saying. There is no puna prasanga vijnana because the next ikochi vibhakta is not on au, it is on e. So it's a different instance of the sutra that is coming up. Clear?
So in general, Mahodaya, this Nitya, Anitya, what you're saying is that only when we use the Parankaryam, we use the other paribhashas like Punah Prasanga Vijnanat and Sakrit Gatau, Yad Baditam, Tad Baditam Eva, all that is applied only in that case, not when we use the Nitya, Anitya, etc. Is that
That is
correct?
correct. That is correct. That is correct. So Nitya Anitya will be a permanent blocking. Antaranga Bahiranga is usually a permanent blocking, but there are other cases. So for example, even in the Utsarga Apavada, it is possible to have Utsarga after Apavada. In Antaranga Bahiranga, it is possible to have Bahiranga after Antaranga. There are like different paribhashas to capture that. But in general, Sakrut Gato and Punav Prasanga Vijnanat are restricted to the Parva versus Purva resolution. Okay?
Mahoday, so in this case, when we had Iko Yanachi first and then we kind of used Prathamayo Purva Savarna and said, so do we ever again start with the first sutra and again compare, say, Iko Yanachi and Iko Vibhakta? Do we have to do that? Like once we rule out, when there are 4 or multiple sutras which are coming, once we rule out couple of them, like do we take all combinations or it's just
Exactly. So there is no need to take all combinations. If you rule out one of them, you can do a chain reaction. Like if one of them gets killed by another and the other gets killed by the third one and so on, just you can do the chain reaction. So basically the way you do is you rule out all the Varnakaryas first, then you come to Angakarya and then within the Angakaryas you apply whatever technique you want to apply. This is a general way the Prakriya goes ahead. So now we agreed that Napumsakachya will apply because of Nityatva, Vari plus Au becomes Vari plus She. And then Vari plus E. So I have a question over here. Vari plus Au ityatra Vari plus She iti adeshaha bhavati. Why is that Sh present over there? So what happens if Sh is not there?
Adev Parasya will act, right, Mahodaya?
It's a single letter, right?
Hmm.
The question is if there was no sh, right?
There was no Sh in the She pratyaya. The She pratyaya comes from the sutram Jasah She. You must have memorized this section. Jasah
Yeah.
She, Aungaha Apaha Napumsakacha. This Sh is required for the Jasa pratyaya. Jasa is Anekal. Therefore, She is required, and then he just continues it as Anuvritti for the next 2 sutras Aungaha Apaha and Napumsakacha. For Aungaha Apaha and Napumsakacha, there is no need to have an Anikal pratyaya, but instead of defining a different pratyaya, he just piggybacks on an existing pratyaya because having a sh does not harm at all. Clear?
Also, he needed Dirgha Ikaraha only for this. He didn't need a Dirgha Ikaraha for Jasashi. But because he combined the two, he took a Dirgha Ikaraha.
Very good. Very good. He required a Dirgha Ikara over here, and for Sarvanama Jasa, he required Shi with the Raswa Ikara, but he combined the two. He took the benefit that A plus E and A plus E is A, and therefore he used a common pratyaya called Shi for all the 3. Dirghocharanam Uttarartham. Did you discuss this in the class? Dirghocharanam Uttarartham is what Kashika clearly says. You do not need a Dirghocharana, but it is for Aungaha Apaha. Actually for Napumsakacha, not even Aungaha Apaha, for Napumsakacha.
Actually, I wondered why he took Dirgha Ikara, and I hunted through all this Vritti. How much ever I understood, I figured out.
It's a very good observation, but this is exactly how the Vyakarana should be learned. Like, why is Dirgha Ikara required? It is not required for Jasashi, it is not required for Aungaha Apaha, it is required for Napumsakacha. And why sure required? It is not required for Angahapa, it is not required for Napumsakacha, it is required for Jasahashi. Clear? So now what happens in case of Vari plus E? What is the Badhya Badhaka Bhava on the next step?
SCA teacher should
SCA
can
teacher,
also.
and then you have
Akasavarne Dirgha.
Ikochi Vibhakta. So in case of Vari plus E, obviously you have Akasavarne Dirgha, E, you have Prathamayoho Purva Savarna, all the Varnakaryas can be ignored. You have SCA teacher and then you have Ikochi Vibhakta. And how is SCA teacher blocked? By saying
Aungashyam
Aungashyam
pratishedho
Pratishedho
vachyam.
Vachaha, which you have studied in the course, hopefully. सो औङ्गश्यां
Yes.
प्रतिषेधो वाच्यः इत्यनेन यस्येति चैति सूत्रस्य बाधः क्रियते इकोचि विभक्तौ इत्यनेन नुमागमे कृते वारिणी इति रूपं सिद्ध्यति. Clear?
Yes.
We'll stop here, or you want to do vari plus jasa? Vari plus jasa will take quite some time, so we'll stop here, and then in the next class we will continue with the remaining forms of the vari word.